You're listening to the Health Courage Collective Podcast, episode 32, Your Hormonal Advantages on Different Days of the Month, part 2. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective Podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast. It's so good to be with you. Thank you so much for being here. How has your last week gone? Have you noticed any similarities in your personal experiences and what is common during different phases of your cycle? Have you thought of ways you can use your superpowers of creativity and planning during your follicular phase and communication, collaboration, and energy during your ovulatory phase? Or are you starting more basic and need to start from just noticing what phase you're even in? That's good too. Maybe you're further along in your hormone journey, or for some other reason your hormones don't follow this 28-day rhythm anymore. Is there still a way you can use this information to be more in tune with who you are best capable of being from day to day? Most of this information comes from the book In the Flow by Elisa Vitti. Last week we covered the first two phases of your cycle. The 7 to 10 day follicular phase, that's phase 1, that starts as soon as you stop bleeding. And the 3 to 4 day ovulatory phase, that's phase 2, that comes next. We have 2 more phases to cover, so let's get to it. Remember, if it's helpful to you, there's a free PDF download that you can grab. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's at healthcourage.ck.page/cycle. But just click that link. You can download it and have a quick guide to refer to if you forget which cycle is which or what your superpowers are in your different phases of the cycle. Okay, so on to phase 3. Phase 3 is called the luteal phase. It's the longest phase. It lasts for 10 to 14 days. This will be somewhere around days 15 to 25 of the cycle or so. The follicle from which the egg was released in the ovary is called the corpus luteum. So that's where the name luteal phase comes from. And it grows inside the ovary in this phase, sparking the production of progesterone. So the egg has traveled down to the uterus, but the follicle is still inside the ovary. We talked about progesterone back in episode 7, if you recall. Estrogen levels have fallen a bit after ovulation, but they start to rise again. The rise in progesterone signals the body to keep the thickened endometrium, or the lining of the uterus, in place in anticipation of the possibility of a fertilized embryo. It also signals the pituitary gland to stop releasing FSH and LH. Toward the end of the cycle, if the egg hasn't been fertilized, the corpus luteum is efficiently reabsorbed into the body. Estrogen and progesterone peak somewhere around days 18 to 24 of the cycle, and then estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone all fall to their lowest levels right before your period starts. This is when people complain of typical PMS symptoms, which are a common but unnecessary part of the luteal phase. PMS usually has to do with an imbalance of too much estrogen relative to how much progesterone you have. We talked about that common imbalance back in episode 7. Progesterone is great and often an easy fix for a whole host of problems. Your superpowers during your luteal phase are completion, detail orientation, and nurturing. The luteal phase is a time of completion when you're naturally inclined to finish projects and tie up loose ends. Progesterone, which rises, peaks, and then drops off during this phase, promotes relaxation, enhances your mood, and improves sleep. So you may feel those benefits rise and then fall during this cycle. The luteal phase is when your brain chemistry is optimized for detail and task orientation. In the first half of this phase, you'll still have some energy to spend interacting with others. In the second half, you'll want to start saying no and setting boundaries. The luteal phase is your get it done phase. You'll start noticing things that you didn't see before and prioritizing responsibilities that might have been ignored. It's a great time to get organized and accomplish the goals and projects you planned during your follicular phase. Do your administrative tasks and deep work. Getting things done will probably feel more satisfying than socializing or going to meetings during this phase. This is a good time to clean out a closet, organize the cupboards, or order supplies. Don't forget to celebrate how powerful and integrated you are. Your immunity is naturally a little bit lower in the second half of your cycle, presumably so your body doesn't go nuts and attack a fertilized embryo if one starts growing. So it's a good time to be extra diligent with immune-boosting micronutrients if you are exposed to crowds or have sick family members during the second half of your cycle. You're also more likely to feel stressed in the week before your period starts. You naturally make more cortisol during this time, so know that if you wake up worried during the night, you're not alone, and you'd benefit from some extra self-care and relaxing activities during the week before your period. Also, in the week before your period, falling estrogen levels can cause a drop in serotonin levels, which can increase cravings for simple carbs. Unfortunately, simple carbs can exacerbate PMS symptoms like bloating and cause more of a blood sugar roller coaster ride than at other times of the month. Since it's pretty predictable, you can plan ahead for this and have a plan in place to get through that week more healthfully in the future. Getting more calcium and vitamin D during the week before your period might help decrease PMS symptoms. Some women getting close to perimenopause, like women in their late 40s, start having hot flashes right before their period starts. This makes sense because it's a time when your estrogen naturally falls. Eating foods with phytoestrogens like tempeh, miso, flax seeds, and organic soy can help keep hot flashes in check. If not, it might be a time for a visit to a specialized doctor for a little bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Most regular doctors don't know enough about it and might even poo-poo the idea. But in my opinion, bioidentical is always better than synthetic hormones, so you might have to do some digging to find the right practitioner. There are also herbs that can help. Your metabolism naturally speeds up during the luteal phase, so you need a few more calories every day during the second half of your cycle. You can prevent cravings from taking over by proactively taking enough B vitamins and eating some slow-burning carbs and foods rich in fiber. Eating cooked greens like cooked collard greens and watercress can help reduce fluid retention. Higher fiber foods like pears and walnuts help flush out estrogen more effectively. Complex carbs in the second half of this phase will keep serotonin and dopamine levels up to prevent mood swings. Overall, you want nutrient-dense foods that will keep your energy levels up. Higher levels of progesterone during this phase can slow intestinal transit time, so making sure to get a good amount of fiber can prevent this from becoming a constipation problem. During the first half of your luteal phase, you'll still have a good amount of energy to burn, and it's a good time to focus on strength training. During the second half of your cycle, when your hormone levels fall, you'll naturally shift out of muscle building mode. This is a good time to switch to focusing on flexibility development. Phase 4 of your cycle is when what is labeled day 1 starts, but it's really the end. This is the menstrual phase. As the corpus luteum gets reabsorbed, progesterone production drops, triggering your uterus to shed that thickened endometrial lining, and your period starts. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists have decreed your period to be the 5th vital sign. It's that important. And only half the population has this ability to get this free, personalized health insight. If you have hormonal problems, you should most definitely get your hormone levels tested. I think the Dutch test is the best way to go, but that's a story for another day. Like it or not, if you have a monthly bleed, it will give you some good clues about what is going on with your endocrine system. So you need to do some observation. It might seem kind of gross to you, but maybe not. Hopefully not. So here we go. If you see bright cherry red clot-free blood when you change your pad or tampon, that's an indication that your hormone levels are likely in balance. Yay! If the blood is a deep purple-blue color with clumps and clots, this is a sign that your estrogen levels are too high in proportion to your progesterone level. So we call that estrogen dominance. Unopposed high estrogen levels, unopposed meaning they're out of balance, you don't have enough progesterone relative to how much estrogen you have. Unopposed high estrogen levels cause extra thickening of the endometrial lining, causing heavier periods, stronger cramps, bigger mood swings, and depression. It also causes problems like uterine fibroids, ovarian cysts, and endometriosis. Prolonged unbalanced high levels of estrogen can also increase risk for thyroid problems and breast and ovarian cancers. If you see brown blood, that means your progesterone is probably too low. When you don't have enough progesterone, the uterine lining doesn't shed as completely, and the leftovers oxidize and turn brown. Lovely, right? So brown blood on the first or last day of your period can be a signal that you're running low on our old friend, progesterone. Low progesterone levels can cause infertility, miscarriage, mood swings, anxiety, depression, trouble concentrating, sleep disorders, headaches, migraines, uterine hyperplasia, and low libido. Check back in with episode 7 for more about progesterone deficiency. If your blood is pale pink on the first and last days of your period, it's a sign that your estrogen levels might be too low. If you don't have enough estrogen around, your endometrial lining doesn't get as thick, and your periods are usually shorter and lighter. Seems like a good deal until you realize that low estrogen is a good way to age quicker and get osteoporosis and cardiovascular disease. It's low estrogen that causes decreased skin elasticity, vaginal dryness, low sex drive, thinning hair, and depression. Low estrogen is a hallmark of perimenopause. I don't want you to think that this natural advancement in aging is a bad thing, because it's not. You're meant to get older and wiser, but if your declining estrogen levels are causing problems, you might want to safely boost them back up by taking some bioidentical estrogen, preferably not orally. Unpredictable periods are a sign of perimenopause, those 4 years or so before your period will stop completely. If you go more than 35 days between periods, then your FSH or LH may be too low. Remember, those are follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Possibly your progesterone or adrenal or pituitary glands could be low too. Then, of course, if your periods are missing prior to menopause, if they're irregular or a mixture of all of these different colors, something more complicated is going on, and it's time for a visit to a doctor. But remember, not just any doctor, someone who can work with you to get to the root cause and support your hormones naturally. Birth control pills are not a good fix. If you remember from episode 7, if your doctor offers you synthetic progestins, run screaming from the room. Your superpowers during your menstrual phase are analysis and intuition. The menstrual phase is when your hormones are at their lowest, and it's a great time for reflection and looking inward to do some soul searching. This is the time that you have the most communication between the left and right hemispheres of your brain. This means you are best able to integrate how you feel with a correct analysis of the facts to determine the best course of action. It's a good time to think strategically about the big picture of your life and reassess how you've been spending your time and energy. Review what's working and what needs work. Remember to be kind to yourself. Make an extra effort to connect with your instincts. You're most likely to receive clear, intuitive messages during this phase. Your 2 hemispheres of your brain are communicating well, so think through what you might want to start or stop doing in the upcoming weeks and months ahead. Many women feel restless or dissatisfied during their period. Learn to hear what that restlessness is trying to help you figure out. Get enough rest and start understanding what you can do to address your needs better. Don't let yourself get run down, but do consider what changes you might be longing to make in your life. What are your instincts whispering to you? This is a good time to prioritize alone time. Let your husband do a little more around the house for a day or two so you can recharge. Because your hormone levels are at their lowest during this phase, be sure to get enough protein and healthy fats during this phase. Eating enough protein will make sure you have enough building blocks for hormone synthesis during your next cycle. Warming foods feel best during this phase. Some women have looser bowels during this phase due to the drop in progesterone, and eating different foods in different phases of your cycle can help reduce this problem too. While you're bleeding, your energy levels are at their lowest. Forcing yourself to suffer through high-intensity workouts is not only unpleasant, but can also stress your body to the point that it turns on fat storage mode and muscle wasting. Not good. You might make more progress towards your goals by giving yourself permission to deload your barbell and do what feels deeply restorative to you, like walking, foam rolling, and yoga. Yoga has also been proven to help lessen period cramps. Whew, you made it. How do you feel? It's a lot of information because your body does a boatload of cool stuff every month. Remember, you can go download that free PDF if you need a quick refresher as the weeks go by. Yes, most of this has to do with being able to propagate the species, but I think there's more to it than just that. What do you think? It's in our natures to figure out how to jive with this infradian rhythm and not be the same every day. Of course, each of these phases that we talked about naturally transition from one to the next. It's not some kind of dramatic swing from one extreme to the other. Just a natural shift from one dominant power to the next. Obviously, you're not going to go out and completely rearrange your life around your cycle. I mean, go ahead and do that if it feels like the right move for you. But for the most part, you'll continue to do what you've always done. But I hope you've gotten a few ideas about how to play to your strengths a little bit more and to most definitely not think something's wrong with you when you have a day where you feel like you're not quite up to what you normally do, or you feel like eating a little differently than you normally do. You're not crazy. It's supposed to be this way. There may also be ways that you can just be more observant and possibly switch up your skincare routines if you notice differences in your skin throughout the month, or be a little more proactive about your fiber and digestive enzyme intake if you tend to have GI issues on certain days of the month. I've tried to be a little more mindful of my infradian rhythms for the past little while, thinking a bit more about what I eat on which days of the month and how hard to push myself and when. I like the idea of focusing on lighter, fresher foods during the first phase of your cycle. That feels good. In the book, Elisa Vitti is pretty adamant about resting during your menstrual phase and not doing heavy weights or high intensity stuff. Only deeply restorative things. I'll admit that I didn't love that idea when I first heard it. If you do, great, you're probably better off for it. So I tried to be okay with skipping a day of lifting just as an experiment, but when it came time to skip, I really didn't want to, so I thought, okay, what's my superpower during this phase? Pop quiz. Do you remember? It's intuition. So I asked my intuition for its opinion, and it wanted to do some heavy overhead presses. So I did. And I went to my HIIT class, and it turns out that's what felt deeply restorative to me. So I think it fit the criteria for the quote, right exercise to do. You'll find what's right for you to do too. I think it's the openness to day or week changes that can be helpful. Nothing needs to be rigid here. What I most hope you take away from these 2 episodes is that you can absolutely still do anything you want to, anytime you want to. None of these hormonal changes are limitations or excuses. You are not less than because your physiology is not the same every single day. You are more than you previously may have thought because you have all your regularly programmed awesomeness plus a boost of certain attributes during some weeks. Think of it like your fairy godmother comes along and gives you a turbo boost of creativity, planning, communication, energy, completion, detail orientation, analysis, or intuition to tap into. And her visits are predictable. There's something you can plan for. If you feel like her bibbidi-bobbidi-boo went awry and you're experiencing hormonal problems rather than advantages, please know that you don't have to keep living that way. There are things that can be done to get you back on track. Your complicated body is not a burden or a mystery. How can you treat it with love and tap into more of its strengths this month? Next week, we're going to talk about what works better than time management. Until then, don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.